an impact on our Navy shipbuilding, while strengthening America's broader maritime industrial base as a foundation for economic security and national security. This hearing could not be more timely. The state of America's commercial shipbuilding industry is not just an economic concern, it is a national security imperative that we have let slide for way too long. The scale of the challenge we face today is real, it's urgent, and I would say it's daunting. The United States builds less than 1% of the world's commercial ships. Meanwhile, our adversary, China, alone accounts for nearly half of global production, backed by state planning, subsidies, and, as always, coercive trade practices. This is not just an economic statistic, it is a dire warning. Maritime power is directly tied to our ability to project influence, support our Navy, mobilize sea lift, sustain commerce, and ensure resilient supply chains in times of crisis. Nowhere is this more evident than in the great state of Alaska. Key economic pillars of my state, the U.S. military, mining, fisheries, oil and gas, tourism, are all dependent on maritime transportation to move goods, resources, ammunition, and people. Alaska's remoteness, dependence on our sea trade, and strategic position between the Pacific and Arctic theaters underscore the need to ensure stable, American-controlled supply routes connecting the continental United States with its territories and its non-contiguous states. My colleague from Hawaii, I think, would agree with that. And to avoid reliance on foreign vessels for domestic and territorial trade, especially given Alaska's proximity to major foreign powers across the North Pacific. We've seen what America can do when it chooses to lead. During World War II, as vividly captured in Arthur Herman's Freedom's Forge, we transformed from a nation unprepared for war into the world's industrial powerhouse, outbuilding our adversaries and our allies combined. We can do this. We've done it before. That shipbuilding surge didn't happen because we were forced into it. It happened because we chose to meet the moment with purpose, coordination, and urgency. That's why the Trump administration's executive order on restoring America's maritime dominance is so important. It acknowledges that this is not a problem of isolated shipyards or fragmented markets. It is a national strategic challenge. I look forward to reviewing the forthcoming Maritime Action Plan from the administration, which is due next month. It will lay out the policies, investments, and reforms needed to restore U.S. shipbuilding competitiveness and secure our maritime future. Three things that I think are critical for success in this town: White House leadership, appropriated dollars, and legislative action that is bipartisan. I think that we have the beginnings of all three of these on shipbuilding. Certainly Congress has begun to act. The budget reconciliation bill, the one big beautiful bill, has made historic investments in the Navy, in shipbuilding, over $25 billion, in the Coast Guard, over $25 billion, authorizing multiple destroyers, submarine, oilers, and nearly just $9 billion in new Arctic icebreakers. These investments are not only critical to national defense, they also provide steady demand signals to shipyards, suppliers, and workers across the country. We are also seeing important bipartisan momentum through legislation such as the Ships for America Act. And I don't know if Senator Kelly's still here. There he is. And Senator Young, I'm sure, will be here. The two lead co-sponsors of that. I am a co-sponsor of that, which recognizes the revitalization of U.S. commercial shipbuilding must be a whole-of-nation effort. This legislation aims to strengthen domestic production capacity, incentivize innovation, and ensure that our industrial base can compete globally while advancing national security goals. But more money won't alone solve the problem. We need smarter procurement systems, ones that reward performance, improve accountability, and avoid the delays and cost overruns that have plagued far too many federal programs. New approaches to contracting and digital integration are showing promise. We should build on that progress and replicate it across ship types and agencies, commercial and the U.S. Navy. Finally, this is most importantly, in my view, about people. Welders, naval architects, mariners, engineers, and apprentices. Revitalizing America's shipbuilding means investing in a workforce that can design, build, and sail the ships for tomorrow. It means restoring the American maritime trades as a source of good jobs and national pride throughout communities across our great nation. And in that regard, I do want to mention to my colleagues, I certainly hope that when we vote for the CR once again at 11:30, we get enough Democrats to just reopen the darn government. Enough is enough. The big federal government union came out and said, support this. This impacts shipbuilding. This impacts FEMA. I was back home over the weekend. We had a big typhoon. We have tons of people in the federal government right now working without pay. Enough is enough. So reopen the government. We'll negotiate on subsidies. I think many of you know Senator Schumer has bent the knee to the far left. Let's reopen the government and get these workers who build our ships in public yards paid as well. So with that, I want to turn to my ranking member, Senator Blunt Rochester, for her opening statement, and I do want to thank the witnesses on this very important and well-attended hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Sullivan, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. I also want to thank my colleague, Senator Mark Kelly, for his leadership on these issues, these critical issues, and for taking time to even sit down with me in his office and explain why this is so important to him. And so thank you, Senator Kelly, as well. Reviving our nation's shipbuilding sector would strengthen our national security, protect our supply chains, support our small businesses, and lower costs for everyday Americans. And while I agree this is an important topic, it's unfortunate that we're holding it during a government shutdown. And I would be disingenuous if I didn't say that this is not normal. Millions of Americans are about to see their healthcare costs skyrocket, and a loss of SNAP benefits will impact the ability of people to put food on the table. And so to me, in this moment, we should be focused on reopening the government.
Amen.
And making sure that this affordability crisis doesn't further impact American families. Despite the president's promise to lower costs on day one, costs are going up every day. Tariffs on steel and lumber certainly don't help our shipbuilders. And I agree with the chairman that 3 things are required. The House has to be here to work. The Senate has to continue to do the strong work that we've done historically in a bipartisan way. And we need the president to be a part of this. And so investing in our shipbuilding industry can help solve some of our affordability problems, and we are in desperate need. But the way we do it is together. Shipbuilding is more than an industry, it's a strategic capability. It's the cornerstone of American economic and national security, providing our nation with a skilled workforce with advanced manufacturing capacity that can build and sustain vessels essential to both U.S. commerce and defense readiness. Yet workforce shortages, supply chain fragility, and aging infrastructure have undercut our ability to dominate in this sector. we should be ringing the alarm bells. But again, I'm deeply concerned that this critical conversation will be overshadowed by the moment that we're in. And I know that I join my colleagues in saying that the American people want us to come together, open the government, and make sure that their healthcare costs are not out of control. Thank you for your continued partnership together on these critical issues. And at this moment, I yield back and look forward to the testimony as well as asking our questions.
So again, I think the clean CR votes at 11:30. Let's reopen the government. It's been bipartisan. Join the other Democrat senators who've had the courage to cross Senator Schumer, because this has been all about him, right? We all know that. Everybody knows that. I talked to Senate Democrats. We all know that. So let's reopen the government now with a vote on the clean CR, which the Federal Employees Union wants to do as well. But I hope this hearing can be about shipbuilding, not about what we should be doing, which is reopening the government at 11:30. And with that, I do offer Senator Cantwell, the ranking member who cares a lot about shipbuilding, on this committee, and I hope she will say a few words about shipbuilding. But if we want to talk healthcare and the government shutdown, again, my colleagues, please vote for the clean CR. Everybody knows it's the right thing to do. That's how you solve all these issues. SNAP, federal workers, boom, right now. We could solve that in an hour and a half. Pretty easy.
Thank you,
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Chairman Sullivan, and thank you to Senator Blunt-Rochester, and thank you for holding this important hearing on shipbuilding, and I appreciate our witnesses being here. Shipbuilding is a bipartisan issue, and we all agree that we need to do more to have American-built and American-crewed ships to expand global trade, protect our supply chain, and bolster national security. It was great to have the MARAD nominee before us last week, who shared an enthusiastic vision of how the United States needs to regain our maritime leadership. I look forward to confirming him in this spot. Following decades of decline, the United States constructs just 2% of the world, 0.2% of the world's commercial shipping tonnage, while China, South Korea, Japan build more than 90%. In fact, in 2022, China had 1,794 commercial ocean-going ships under construction. South Korea had 734, Japan had 587, Europe had 319, and the United States, we were just building 5. Our economy depends on trade. We know that in the Pacific Northwest, where about 40% of our state is dependent on trade, if we do not revive our shipbuilding capacity, our nation will not be able to compete at this particular moment in the Pacific. That puts our economy at risk. It creates a dangerous weakness in our national defense. So we must continue to protect the Jones Act, expand and streamline Title 11 loan guarantee programs, and modernize our infrastructure. And we must do more to maintain American cargo through cargo preference oversight and through support for legislation like Senator Moran's bill to move food aid to USDA. We need to invest in the technology and training to establish cutting-edge maritime ecosystems so that our shipyards and our workers can build the most sophisticated ships in the world. In the state of Washington, the maritime sector supports 174,000 jobs through maritime logistics, shipping, shipbuilding, seafood, maritime transportation, and associated trades. In total, the sector supports $45 billion of economic revenue, and shipbuilding in particular are good family wage jobs with an average salary of $120,000. Can you imagine that? An average job. So Ms. Snow is here today representing her family's shipyard in Seattle, which has grown from 30 employees in 2020 to more than 100 employees today. And as our shipbuilding and maritime economy is at a crossroads, I encourage my colleagues to listen to Ms. Snow as she speaks about the model they've developed to try to bring more talent to the shipyard. And by recruiting new talent to shipbuilding, she is meeting the demand for employees, but also providing us with how this issue may be applied across the country. Mr. Paxton, when it comes to thinking big, you represent one of the largest shipyards in the country, including Vogel, who has operated in the state of Washington. So I look forward to hearing from you about how you can boost capacity in the larger yards, including financing and your support for workforce challenges. Mr. Vogel, as a logistics expert at TOTE, I welcome your views on construction management and how we better support the U.S. flag fleet. My colleague, Senator Sullivan, and I have worked on many issues, including getting the port at Anchorage fully supported and the capacity that it will take to continue to deliver important products there. And Dr. Mercogliano? No, I'm not doing very well there. I understand you have proposed a mariner's reserve similar to military reserves, and that is an idea I hope our committee will consider and think about. So thank you all for being here. I look forward to working with my two colleagues here. I think the President, I think the MURAD nominee, and I think the Secretary of Transportation have all said they want to make this maritime revivance a national priority. I do too. So look forward to hearing the comments at today's hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. And now I also want to welcome our witnesses. Mr. Paxton, who's the president of the Shipbuilders Council of America. As the president, he represents more than 175 companies that own and operate shipyards across the United States and maritime industrial suppliers. Mr. Vogel, Jeff Vogel, is the president of Legal Affairs and Operations at TOTE Services, which delivers ship management, technical solutions, and vessel construction management for customers across the U.S. maritime industry. Dr. Salvatore Mercogliano, a professor at Campbell University, is the chair of the Department of History, Criminal Justice, Political Science at the university. He's also a former deck officer in the U.S. Merchant Marine, and Ms. Snow has already been introduced by Senator Cantwell, is the Talent Acquisition Engagement Manager at the Snow and Company, Inc., which is a family-owned and operating shipbuilding company in Seattle. So with that, I'd like each of our witnesses, they have 5 minutes to give their opening statement. A longer statement can be submitted for the record. So Mr. Paxton, we will begin with you.
Thank you. On behalf of the Shipbuilders Council of America, I'd like to thank Chairman Sullivan, Ranking Member Blunt Rochester, Senator Cantwell, Senator Baldwin, Senator Young, and Senator Kelly. Thank you for your leadership on the Ships for America Act. Much appreciated. I'm Matthew Paxton, President of the Shipbuilders Council of America. As you, Chairman, said, I represent over 175 companies that own and operate shipyards across the United States and suppliers that comprise the maritime industrial base. Our members build, repair, modernize, and maintain vessels of every class, from inland towboats and workboats to complex government and commercial ships for the U.S. Navy, Coast Guard, Maritime Administration, state and local governments, and for the 40,000 plus vessels engaged in domestic commerce under the Jones Act. My testimony today will focus on 4 central points. First, the Jones Act is foundational to our maritime, industrial, and national security, providing a stable market that sustains U.S. shipbuilding capacity at no cost to the federal government. Second, domestic shipbuilding is not a preference. It is a national security necessity that preserves the workforce, facilities, and supply chains we rely on in times of crisis and conflict. Third, Congress should enact legislation like the Ships for America Act to set a national maritime strategy, rebuild commercial capacity, and restore resiliency across our shipyard and mariner ecosystem. Fourth, U.S. shipbuilders do not compete on a global level playing field. The disparity between the U.S. and international markets is driven by pervasive foreign industrial targeting and non-market practices, as repeatedly documented by the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR. Additionally, I'll note there is a persistent distortion in international statistics. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development that provides global tonnage measurements omits much of what America builds in our commercial and government markets. Counting what we actually build matters for policy, which we're going to be discussing today, for investment, and for national defense. American shipyards build some of the most advanced vessels in the world. It's undeniable. Our men and women deliver for our Navy, our Coast Guard, and our domestic commercial markets every day. But we are contending with a global commercial market skewed by decades of foreign, non-market intervention and by international statistics that omit much of what America actually builds. The Jones Act remains the cornerstone of our maritime security. The Ships for America Act is the strategic blueprint we need to restore balance, rebuild commercial capability, and secure the maritime industrial base for the long term. The Ships Act is also complemented by and echoed in the President's executive order to restore America's maritime dominance. At the President's directive, the White House will be releasing a maritime action plan on November 5th. That plan will explicitly aim to align trade tools with industrial strategy, strengthen domestic shipbuilding and repair capacity, and consider a dedicated funding mechanism such as a Maritime Security Trust Fund to support programs under the plan. Those priorities mirror and reinforce the core aims of the Ships for America Act and underscore why the Congress should be receptive to these forthcoming legislative proposals. This is a moment for policy clarity and national purpose. If we want credible sea lift, resilient supply chains, competitive government shipbuilding, and a skilled maritime workforce ready when the nation calls, we must build ships in America, and we must do it at scale. SCA and its members stand ready to work with this subcommittee and the Congress to enact the Ships for America Act, reinforce the Jones Act, and ensure that America's shipyards have the stable demand and strategic direction to deliver the sea change this hearing contemplates, one that revives commercial shipbuilding and strengthens our national security for decades to come. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Paxton. Mr. Vogel.
Good morning, Chairman Sullivan, Ranking Member Blunt Rochester, Senator Cantwell, Senator Baldwin, Senator Young. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the urgent need to revise America's commercial shipbuilding industry. The United States has always been a maritime nation, and the shipbuilding industry is the backbone of our national and economic security. It provides high-paying jobs and delivers on commercial and government demand for vessels. However, we face a stark reality. The U.S. produced just 0.04% of the world's vessels last year, while China delivered over half of the global fleet. This is not because Americans lack ingenuity or shipbuilding skill. This disparity is the direct result of foreign government market manipulations and decades of insufficient support at home to address the threat of foreign maritime dominance. Congressional support through marquee legislation such as the Jones Act and Merchant Marine Act of 1936 has kept our industry alive, supporting over 105,000 jobs and contributing nearly $12 billion to our annual GDP. But to truly restore our shipbuilding strength, our nation must take decisive action to address heavily subsidized foreign competition and provide a clear demand signal for U.S.-built ships. U.S. shipbuilding innovation is not our weakness. It is our strength. TOTE Services is proud to have led the way. In partnership with NASSCO Shipyard in California, TOTE delivered the world's first liquefied natural gas-powered container ship, which established the international market standard. TOTE Services also managed the construction of North America's first LNG bunker barge, supporting the demand for U.S. LNG to fuel vessels in domestic and international trade. We also pioneered the Vessel Construction Manager acquisition strategy for government shipbuilding. By applying commercial principles and removing bureaucratic barriers, the Vessel Construction Manager acquisition strategy has delivered government ships from commercial shipyards on time and under budget, saving taxpayers billions, mitigating government risks, and revitalizing struggling shipyards. In doing so, we have produced the next generation of mariner training vessels, the National Security Multi-Mission Vessels, which has resulted in a stark increase in enrollment at our state maritime academies. To rebuild our government fleet and reinvigorate our commercial shipyards, Congress must expand the Vessel Construction Manager acquisition strategy across agencies and ensure that billions in appropriated shipbuilding funds from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act are swiftly allocated using an experienced vessel construction manager. In addition, Congress and the administration can encourage private investment by modernizing regulations and supporting build charter agreements. I've outlined these proposals in my written testimony. If enacted, such changes would allow American companies to use private capital for the rapid commercial construction of non-combatant government ships that ensure our national security. The Ships for America Act of 2025 and the forthcoming Maritime Action Plan are critical to implementing improvements to the shipbuilding industrial supply chain. Within this context, I urge you to support tax incentives for shipyard investment, including in U.S. territories, and ensure that alternative marine fuels are not disadvantaged by outdated tax rules. These steps will strengthen our industrial base and restore American shipbuilding dominance. I appreciate this subcommittee's efforts to restore our critical U.S. shipbuilding industrial base. Thank you for your leadership and commitment to this vital industry. Again, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Vogel. Dr. Mercogliano.
Good morning, Chairman Sullivan, Ranking Member Cantwell, Ranking Member Blunt-Rochester, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on a subject that has defined my professional and academic career. I'm a professor at Campbell University in Buies Creek, North Carolina. I'm a graduate of the New York Maritime Academy, a former deck officer in the U.S. Merchant Marine, working both afloat and ashore for the U.S. Navy's Military Sealift Command. After swallowing the anchor, I earned an MA in Maritime History and Nautical Archaeology from East Carolina University and a PhD from the University of Alabama, where my dissertation examined the role of American shipping in national defense. I also serve as an adjunct professor at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, teaching a graduate-level course in maritime industry policy, and in 2021, I launched the YouTube channel, What's Going On with Shipping. As an active participant and observer of the U.S. maritime industry, I have witnessed its long decline. The SHIPS Act is the most significant maritime reform effort since the Merchant Marine Act of 1970. Along with measures such as the U.S. Trade Representative Section 301 port fees and President Trump's executive order on shipbuilding, this legislation represents a critical step toward transforming the United States from a purely naval power into a true maritime power with a revitalized commercial sector. Twice in the 20th century, America launched major shipbuilding efforts. The first, led by Edward Hurley during and after World War I, produced a large fleet and inspired the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, better known as the Jones Act, which laid the foundation for the first national maritime strategy. The second effort came with the Merchant Marine Act of 1936, which introduced operating and construction differential subsidies for vessels in the international trade and funded the building of 500 ships over 10 years. This effort created the industrial base necessary for the Two-Ocean Navy Act and enabled the United States to transport the arsenal of democracy from the home front to the battlefront. The SHIPS Act and related measures represent a long overdue Merchant Marine Act of 2025. While ambitious, especially the goal of building 250 ships in 10 years, it is essential if we hope to rebuild our maritime capacity. However, achieving these goals require rebuilding the supporting infrastructure. A key step is facilitating the reflagging of vessels, as seen with the container ship CMA CGM Phoenix and the LNG tanker American Progress, and promoting the benefits of American registry. This should include a careful re-examination of the Jones Act, not to repeal it, but to modernize its application. Reflagging ships will require several complementary actions. First, the Maritime Security Program and Tanker Security Program should be expanded to offset higher U.S. operating costs. Second, consistent cargo flows must be secured through cargo preference laws, government contracts, or incentives for private shippers. For example, offering tax rebates to companies that ship goods on U.S. flagged vessels or reducing tariffs on goods transported aboard American ships would help level the playing field. These policies would also benefit island and non-contiguous states and territories that rely heavily on Jones Act shipping. Third, the benefits of U.S. registry vice open registries, such as Panama, Liberia, and the Marshall Islands, should be more pronounced with protection afforded by the U.S. Navy against threats like the Houthis and providing of war risk insurance to mitigate the cost to operate in contested regions. While large blue water vessels take years to construct, a near-term opportunity lies in modernizing the domestic fleet of tugboats, towboats, and ferries. Much of this fleet is outdated and aging, posing both economic and security risks to the nation. Insufficient tug capacity, for instance, contributed to the Dolly incident in Baltimore, A national program to replace and modernize these vessels could provide an immediate boost to domestic shipyards and workforce development while enhancing port safety and resilience. Equally important is investment in advanced maritime technologies that could once again place the U.S. at the forefront of innovation. The Shipping Act of 1916 spurred adoption of oil-fired boilers, freeing U.S. ships from dependence on coaling stations and challenging British dominance. During World War II, prefabrication techniques revolutionized shipbuilding and made mass production possible. Today, the U.S. has an opportunity to lead again, this time through technology, perhaps such as small modular nuclear reactors for maritime propulsion. Finally, I strongly urge passage of the SHIPS Act to establish a maritime security advisor to lead this effort and a maritime trust fund for financing, expanding the investment tax credit, Title 11 loan guarantees, and shipbuilding finance incentives would redirect American capital from foreign shipbuilding toward domestic production. In addition, the proposed Centers for Maritime Innovation could support research, workforce training, and policy enhancement. Finally, reviving the U.S. maritime industry is not merely an economic or industrial challenge, it is a matter of national security and global competitiveness. The SHIPS Act provides the vision and framework needed to rebuild our shipbuilding base, reestablish a robust merchant marine, and ensure that the United States remains a maritime nation capable of sustaining its global role. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss this issue. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Final witness, Ms. Snow.
Thank you. My name is Tuuli Snow. My family owns and operates one of the last independent boat building companies in Seattle, Washington. In a city that used to be the home of dozens of shipbuilders, this is quite a feat. We build workboats, pilot boats, fishing vessels, and tugboats, in addition to a contract we hold to build 53 workboats for the U.S. Navy. Last year, we built the first hybrid vessel in the U.S. Department of Energy's fleet, and we're currently building a set of first-of-their-kind electric tugs for a company in Long Beach, California. Small shipyards like ours are essential to supporting the maritime economy. 5 years ago, Snow & Company had 30 employees, and this year we have just over 100. This is not par for the course in terms of hiring. Shipyards across the U.S. are struggling to attract and maintain talent for a few reasons, most of which include ignoring vast labor markets. A lot of our growth has been due to a deeply innovative change that I have made in focusing on hiring from non-traditional avenues. We hire veterans, immigrants, refugees, individuals coming out of prison or starting work release, and seek people from communities that have traditionally been overlooked or excluded from the maritime industry. I often say that I play for the maritime long haul, not just for our company, investing my time and energy into building a better industry, not just a better business. Historically, in nature and across the globe, we have seen a more diverse ecosystem is often a more fruitful one, more sustainable, more creative, and more effective. A great barrier to entering the maritime community is exposure. People are unaware of what is out there. Many believe you have to go to sea in order to get a maritime job because they don't know any other aspects of this industry. They don't realize you could be a project manager or a naval architect, an electrical engineer, or even a nurse. This isn't a career path that was introduced to them in kindergarten, middle school, or high school. People don't see the same opportunities and career pathways as other industries. I enter communities, neighborhoods, and towns in Washington to share the great opportunities in this industry and hopefully encourage more people to join it. There's been a huge boom in young people returning to trade school and traditional apprenticeships in the last 2 to 5 years. There's less public shame than in the recent past, where technical colleges have been viewed as less valuable than other four-year universities. People complete these technical programs or apprenticeships with an active and applicable skill set, ready to enter the workforce and bearing significantly less debt. In apprenticeship programs, young people are paid while learning these valuable and necessary skills. This is a change we greatly need, but has made a gap in skills visible. We have hundreds of maritime experts that are ready to retire and a new workforce excited to learn, but this makes our expertise an hourglass shape, heavy on entry level and heavy on expert, but less concentrated in mid-level tradespeople. Investment in our youth is absolutely vital, and this hourglass shows so is investment in working adults. Opportunities to learn new trades and skills, opportunities to be mentored and trained, opportunities that should be granted to those we traditionally ignore. There's a common misconception that you must speak English to have an impactful job in the United States, which I have repeatedly proved to be inaccurate. 2 years ago, I had a Ukrainian refugee reach out to me via email stating he could not speak English, but he could weld and he wanted to apply at our company. I invited him in for an interview and weld test, which the hiring manager was initially very sure would not work out due to his lack of English. About 30 minutes later, after his weld test was complete, the hiring manager came back to me and said, if I do one thing right this year, it's hiring this man because he is incredible. After passing his E-Verify check, we started him immediately. That individual now leads a team of Ukrainian and Russian refugee fabricators and welders. He's one of our highest paid production employees, proving to us that you don't need to speak English to work hard with exceptional results. In a time when we have immediate access to technology that can translate quickly and effectively, taking a chance on skilled non-English speakers seems like an obvious opportunity to me. Building a good team is one thing and keeping it is another. To keep our employees happy, healthy, and present, and to attract young talent, we provide 100% employer-paid health insurance with 80% for any dependents the employee has. Most businesses can't or just won't do this, but we see it as a necessity to build a strong team. We feel the cost is made up for and reflected in the high-quality products we produce. Shipping and shipbuilding are absolutely essential to the livelihood and strength of our country and economy. My request today from all of you is for an investment in the maritime industry, an investment in industrial lands to protect businesses like ours, allocation of funds to small shipyard grants, investment in youth and education to grow this sector for decades to come, investment in health and welfare of our employees, investment in adults looking to learn new skills that will inflate our diminishing workforce, and an investment in marginalized communities that will breathe new life, creativity, and innovation into this industry. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Snow. Let me begin with a questioning, which is just a very obvious question, like what went wrong? Okay? What went wrong? I mean, there's so many areas where, my view, we kind of, critical minerals is the latest and greatest we're seeing. My state has incredible critical minerals, but our own federal government, no offense, a lot of times on the other side of the aisle, they just shut down the ability to produce any critical minerals, and we outsource all of it to China. So we got a big problem. China's dominating this sector like they do critical minerals, like they do. We fell asleep at the switch, and we produce less than 1% of commercial shipping. What went wrong, and how do we fix it? Very tight. I know this is a dissertation, Professor, but if you can keep this very tight, some people blame the Jones Act. What went wrong? We got a giant problem. Our main adversaries kicking our tail on this issue. What went wrong and how do we fix it? Mr. Paxton, keep it succinct.
Yes, sir. We moved away from some industrial policies that we had in the 1970s. We moved away from that. We moved towards government shipbuilding, which was the right thing to do at the time. During the Cold War, 600 Fleet Navy. We had the peace dividend in the 1990s. We decided that global free trade was a given, that we didn't have to worry about freedom of the seas, which we know is not the case anymore. And so we went to flags of convenience, and we got a cheap product out of China, and we took it.
Mr. Vogel?
Chairman, I would absolutely echo what Mr. Paxton said. We made the decision to move away from investing and creating that demand signal for this industry. It's impossible for a U.S. shipyard to compete on a sort of one or two vessel basis versus.
Is that because the Chinese subsidize everything? I mean, look, I mean, the Finns produce icebreakers very efficiently. You saw the president of Finland came up with an agreement. I mean, is it just the subsidies of foreign nations, or is it something that we're doing wrong back here?
So I think it's a two-part. I think it's both the subsidies. We're operating at a level that's similar to or above where Finland is in terms of overall output, but certainly there are challenges. The regulatory requirements that we've placed on government shipbuilding have taken commercial shipyards out of the market.
So our own federal government's red tape, which crushes everything in this country, is a big part of the problem?
Yes, Chairman. And for us, using something like the vessel construction manager model has helped us to remove a lot of that red tape, allow commercial shipyards to get back in. We saw the success at Philly Shipyard, taking that yard from 83 employees now to over 2,000 production employees just by removing a lot of that bureaucratic oversight and allowing the yards.
Now that has major investments from a foreign shipbuilder right now, correct?
That's resulted in those investments.
Are you okay with that?
So I would love to see that
We can learn from the Japanese and Koreans, in my view.
We absolutely can. And the Koreans have created an industry that faces a lot of the same challenges in terms of cost of labor. But we have better natural resources, as you said, sir. So we should be taking those lessons, incorporating them, and I think there's a lot to be learned from our allies.
Okay, Professor, what went wrong? You're a Jones Act supporter. I've read all your materials. What went wrong, though? Why are we in this giant disadvantage, hugely dangerous disadvantage relative to our main adversary who cheats and subsidizes? We all know that, but what went wrong?
Well, in 1934, 1935, we built 2 commercial ships each of those years. Within a 10-year span, we were able to build 1,000 ships in 1943.
Right.
At the end of World War II, we controlled 63% of the world merchant fleet, and we made a conscious decision then to begin a process of rebuilding not just our allies' merchant fleets, but their shipyards and even our enemies, Japan and Germany at the time. And we decided to focus on the naval and military application. It was our decision that really led to the growth of global trade from
By the way,
500
I
million
think you're
tons.
making one point I just want to, when people say, hey, America, we can't build ships. Yeah, really, go look at a nuclear submarine.
Right.
It's pretty darn impressive. No one can build ships like we can, aircraft carriers as well. So we can build ships.
Yes, sir.
But on the commercial side, we can't, or we're not, or we're getting out-competed, correct?
We made a decision in the 80s to kind of shift our shipyards over to building a 600-ship Navy, which at the end of the Cold War went from a 600-ship Navy to a 300-ship Navy. And so we had already sent that capability overseas to Korea, to Japan, to Europe. And now what we see is China taking that lead. Not 5% of shipbuilding was in China in 1999. Today, it's over 60%. And this is an issue that we realize after the fact, that it's not just building Navy and military ships, but we need that commercial ships in the shipyard to provide that residual base for shipyard workers, for capacity. You can't do what Freedom's Forge talks about without that inherent capability, that commercial.
Let me ask one,
underlying.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to get one more question for Mr. Vogel. I'm a big supporter of the energy sector. It's a great strategic advantage for America. It certainly helps my state. It helps the whole country when we're the dominant energy producer on the planet. We export LNG all over the world. We're going to continue to do that. Should there be some kind of tie, maybe within 10 years, to say to some of our LNG producers, hey, if you're going to ship LNG all over the world, should that be on American-built ships? Can't happen overnight. The oil and gas industry doesn't like that idea because they don't think we can build them quickly, efficiently, costly. What do you think? You've kind of done some of that already.
Yes, Chairman, I absolutely support that concept, and as we've seen from the USTR action, it's certainly a critical part of balancing with both sort of the carrot and the stick. We have the capability, we have the ingenuity to build the world's best LNG fleet here in the United States. I fully support creating that cargo base, and with that demand signal, we'll be able to build those ships in the United States.
Okay, Senator Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, thank you to our witnesses. In Delaware, I was fortunate to serve as Secretary of Labor. And so for me, the whole issue of jobs and people being able to live their purpose and get a great skill is vital. And so I was pleased to hear that we are shifting and people's perceptions of what great jobs are is really a focus right now. The focus on the trades, manufacturing, and as former Secretary of Labor, I want to emphasize how critical our maritime and shipbuilding workforce is for our industrial base. Without the skilled men and women in these trades, we can't build the ships, maintain the fleets, or sustain our competitiveness on the global stage. It's interesting, as I was sitting here, my sister, who's kind of like the family historian, sent me a document from our great-grandfather who actually worked at the Philly Navy Yard. And the document actually, Matthew Miller, World War I registration, and he was Merchant and Miners Pier 24 on Delaware Avenue. And so, again, I really appreciate the focus on the future of this country and our security. And I want to ask you, Ms. Snow, not that most of us here are older, but you seem to come from a younger generation. If you could talk about younger generation industry leaders who are looking at recruitment and engagement in a different way than in 1902 when my grandfather got the opportunity. Are current training and apprenticeship programs keeping pace with what the workforce needs are?
I don't think so. Thank you for the question. I think that there could be a lot more investment in trade programs and trainings and also apprenticeships. A lot of businesses can't afford to hire people just to teach and not be on their workforce as well. And so investment in the ability for a company to have their own internal apprenticeship program would really expedite the process of getting trade skills into our work.
If any of the other members want to answer the question about apprenticeships or workforce, be happy to hear.
Yes, Senator. I would say it's a badge of honor that a lot of our shipyards, at their own expense, implement apprenticeship programs with no guarantee at the end of it that they'll employ that person. That highly competitive market for shipyard employees, and so that apprenticeship program could see that person going elsewhere. Highly trainable, highly hireable, I should say. And we do this on a regional basis. We work with our community colleges, we work with our trade schools, and I think it was said earlier, there is a focus now on, it's not necessary to get that 4-year degree, go to trade schools.
Thank you. Dr. Mercogliano, you've written extensively about how the U.S. maritime sector depends on foreign supply chains for key components and materials. What vulnerabilities stand out to you most in our current U.S. shipbuilding supply chain? And what steps could the federal government take to build more secure domestic source base? I'm fortunate to work with Senator Cantwell and Blackburn on strengthening our supply chains, and so would love to hear from you on that.
Well, I would defer to Matt be able to talk to that in a little bit more detail. I can say that my conversations with shipbuilders and looking at the supply chain is we've seen continual disruptions across the supply chain recently. In particularly, obviously, steel and more importantly, specific manufactured parts and specialized parts in shipping is the key that we see vulnerabilities happening. Right now, if you look, for example, anything from pumps to machinery, our supply chain in the United States is very vulnerable. They're down to sometimes one small manufacturer that is building parts for both commercial and naval vessels. And we've seen that down to the third level, below the shipyards, below their suppliers. And so that creates a lot of vulnerability, which means if we can't produce it in-house in the United States, we've got to source it from overseas. And the disruptions we're seeing in the global supply chain and competition for those resources by other shipbuilders out there, Japan, Korea, and particularly China, makes it very vulnerable for us. And it's one of the reasons why you'll hear my associates here talk about creating those infrastructures here in the United States and not be depending on those foreign sources.
I know I have 8 seconds left, but again, I thank you so much for taking the time, and I will follow up with many of you questions for the record. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. We now have our chairman, and I'd like to let him say a few words and ask some questions. It's great to have the chairman of the committee, Senator Cruz, here. Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Welcome to each of the witnesses. Appreciate this hearing on this very important topic. Dr. Mercogliano, let me start with you. The SHIPS Act aims to guarantee annual commercial ship production of 15 to 25 ships per year through subsidies dispersed by a Maritime Security Trust Fund, which would in turn be capitalized by various revenue streams, including new tonnage taxes on international shippers bringing goods into the United States and fines on importers for failing to meet certain ship preferencing requirements. China, South Korea, Japan, meanwhile, each annually deliver hundreds of ships per year. In the face of the advantage of economies of scale that they have and the resulting lower costs they produce, prospects for U.S. shipyards, which face a strained labor pool, high input costs, and serious technological challenges compared to East Asian competitors, the possibility of becoming internationally competitive is at a minimum challenging. Should we assume that large and recurring subsidies, and by extension, annually increasing tonnage taxes on fines on importers to fund them, will need to be an enduring feature of U.S. policy to produce the kind of ship production envisioned by the SHIPS Act?
Historically, that's the way it has been done. If you look at the shipbuilding process in World War I and World War II, it was done either through a large appropriation that was put into a corpus, a body of money to draw from, or it was through a subsidy process. I will note that the U.S. is the 4th largest investor in commercial shipping worldwide, even though we have the 23rd largest merchant marine in the world. The question is, how do we get U.S. money to invest in American shipping vice investing in foreign shipping? And I think if we can tackle that hurdle, then we will not be as dependent on government funding for shipbuilding because we can get that investment into U.S. ships.
So how would you answer the question you just posed? How do we get U.S. money to invest in shipbuilding here at home?
I think we need to change and look at how Korea, Japan, and many other countries give either tax deferments or opportunities for long-term leases or loans, so that you can invest. You know, investing in a ship, you're not going to see a ship for 4 to 5 years. What can we do to offset that, and especially for a shipping company, to minimize their downside, their loss capability should cargo not appear? I mean, we could do processes whereby ships could be turned back into the government if there's no business for them, put into the reserve fleet, basically provide them a minimal loss coverage so that there is more willingness to invest in that. Key thing is getting incentives from Wall Street and venture capitalists to get into this so that we're not relying wholly on the U.S. government for funding.
So why did we lose shipbuilding to begin with? What are the challenges? What are the impediments that we face to domestic shipbuilding?
I think we didn't lose shipbuilding, we shifted our shipbuilding. We decided to focus on naval and military and allow the commercial to go overseas because we viewed that naval capability was a much more larger capability to have, and we assumed that there was going to be a residual left over from that. However, what we saw happen, especially in the 80s into the 90s, with the end of the Cold War, it went from a 600-ship Navy to a 300-ship Navy. All of a sudden, our capacity decreased. And we really did not foresee a really coordinated effort by the Chinese to take over and control shipping in a way that we really have never seen before. Some people make the comparison to the British, but China has done a pure vertical integration of all aspects of shipping in a way unlike any other country has done.
And let me open this up to the rest of the panel. What steps do you think are most important to reinvigorate the commercial shipbuilding industry here in the United States? Mr. Paxton, we'll start with you. I'll give everyone a chance to answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it comes down to, sir, that sustained long-term demand signal, that we're serious about owning our own global logistics. Being dependent on 3 shipping companies around the world for our trade makes us a client state. That's a vulnerability. We are at a national security, when we saw this during COVID, you guys, this committee had to work on the Ocean Reform Act because China wasn't taking our exports. We should own our global logistics to a certain extent. And I think this concept of a strategic commercial fleet under the SHIPS Act makes sense. I would say, sir, there is a lot of capital that's sitting on the sidelines. If there was a demand signal there, I see private industry coming to the shipbuilding industry. You see it in the autonomous space with Saronic and Blue Autonomy. These things are happening, and they're happening in your state as well, sir.
They are indeed. Mr. Vogel?
Mr. Chairman, I would absolutely say creating that demand signal for private investment, removing the regulatory constraints that we have on commercial shipyards can work together to rebalance the international shipbuilding market.
When you say regulatory constraints, what in particular are impediments that, if removed, would unleash shipbuilding?
Mr. Chairman, I think there are twofold. As Dr. Mercogliano said, we moved into government shipbuilding, but there are a huge number of government ships that can be built on a commercial model basis using things like Vessel Construction Manager, getting us out of the legacy shipbuilding, using all the constraints of federal acquisition, instead relying on commercial practices and commercial suppliers in order to build up our capacity. And we need to focus on the full supply chain. We need to focus on engine manufacturers that we have, including in your state, support them so that they can reduce their costs and ultimately reduce the cost of ships. companies like TOTE and our parent company Sawchuck are ready to put private capital to use as well. There are platforms out there like the roll-on, roll-off vessels that need to be recapitalized in our ready reserve force, like the cable lay ships that we need for the Navy that could be paid for with private capital if we had the right charter agreements in place and that right assurance of that long-term investment from the government to operate those vessels.
Ms. Snow, briefly.
Allocations of funds to small shipyard grants and to training programs and apprenticeship programs across the U.S.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up on that point, Ms. Snow, how has, you listed a whole line of things that you guys have done, various ships. How does the shipyard grant boost your capacity?
That's a great question. We are the recipient of a MERID small shipyard grant, and that allowed us to buy a deburring machine, a laser cutter, and a press brake, which we would have to outsource otherwise. So we now have made 15 to 20 more jobs within our business. We've also expanded the number of things that we can do and build. So we can be open for 16 to 20 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day because we have an entirely new element to our business.
So boosting those myriad small shipyard grants and is a huge capacity building. How many jobs would you say that helped?
For just this one specifically, we hired 15 to 20 more people, and then it has changed the track of other people's career paths where they get to learn more and new diverse things. It also would allow us, if we received another, would allow us to create our own in-house apprenticeship program where we could allocate those funds specifically just for a teacher and educator.
Thank you. Mr. Paxton, do we have the capacity to build icebreakers?
Oh, I do think we had that capacity, and that you don't have to take my opinion on that. An RFI went out asking the question. MARAD asked, would you bid on the icebreaker contract? And 7 shipyards came back and said they did. In fact, 2 entities, unsolicited, put proposals in that could deliver an icebreaker within the 4-year period of this administration.
So we don't have to outsource to another country?
I don't think we do.
Okay. Thank you for that. Everybody's mentioned the finance program. Should we make the finance Title 11 or something like it apply to fishing vessels since they're not eligible under Title 11? Mr. Vogel or Mr. Paxton?
Absolutely, Senator. The fishing industry is a critical customer for our commercial shipyards. Title 11 can help to really invigorate and accelerate the investments that are made by commercial fishing companies in building new capacity. A lot of our fleet is quite aged at this point and needs to be recapitalized. Things like Title 11 providing the loan guarantee can really help to accelerate that recapitalization.
So you would just put fishing in there?
I would absolutely support expanding the Title 11 authorization to include fishing.
Great,
Senator.
Great, that's good to hear. And then, back to this, price signal thing, you talked about incentives on the, various tax incentives. Does somebody have a viewpoint there of what needs to happen?
Yes, Senator. I think there are 2 great aspects of the Ships for America Act, and it has a separate focus really on tax incentives. One, a 25% tax credit for investment in shipyards can accelerate much of the reinvestment that we need in commercial shipyards. And then the fuel parity tax aspects to ensure that companies that are making investments in the newest technology are not unfairly disadvantaged in competing in our domestic trades.
Thank you. Well, that's been our traditional tool at federal level. So I'm glad to see that people want a demand signal. That was our goal with Chips and Science as well, to say that there's a demand signal to innovate in the United States of America because of those incentives. Here we have a larger challenge to get that infrastructure right and move forward. And Dr. Mercogliano, you mentioned that shipping is national defense. Do you think that we need to do more to integrate? I'm not sure I heard many people say anything about AI or blockchain technology, but isn't there a way for the United States to move even faster? I see, Ms. Snow, you shaking your head, to move faster on new innovation technology to help with shipping logistics?
I think so. I think technology is the one advantage that the United States has consistently brought to bear that allows us to propel ourselves past competition. And if we can incorporate that, I always argue that the greatest innovation in shipping came from somebody outside the shipping industry. Malcolm McLean came up with the containerization. So AI, anything we can do to assist that, I think is key for us maximizing. The question is, how do we integrate it into the shipping aspect right now? Because again, a lot of AI and a lot of those developers don't know anything about it, and we're not doing a great job in bringing that technology into it.
That's what I see in my state. I don't know, Ms. Stowe, if you have a comment, my time's running out. But I have seen the blockchain people come to the sector with ideas, but then you have to get somebody in the sector. So I do think maybe a program that helps propel that along would be something that people would take advantage of, as opposed to just kind of standing still when they hear about it, right? We need these two things to be married together. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Young.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for prioritizing this important topic. Mr. Chairman, I ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record 51 statements from 64 organizations spanning industry, labor, and the broader maritime community expressing support for the Ships for America Act. These statements reflect the broad, bipartisan, and nationwide support for rebuilding U.S. shipbuilding capacity, expanding our U.S.-flagged ocean-going commercial fleet, and ensuring the American workers remain at the heart of our maritime strength.
Without objection.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Mercogliano, thanks so much for being here. And, it's been said by a number of our witnesses today that American shipbuilding has ebbed and flowed, and you've each spun, I think, very related and complementary narratives about why right now we have a shipbuilding infirmity in this country. And I agree with, I think, Mr. Paxton's assessment that it was market forces that led us to chase value, the same quality or even better quality at lower cost. And we delivered that to the taxpayers, but we lost sight of the fact that it's important for us policymakers to be baking into the price of certain critical goods, strategic goods, a national security or economic security premium. And so it's time we updated our economics. If we learned anything over the course of a global pandemic with semiconductors and other valuable products, it's that we need to do our work up here on the Hill. So this hearing is really important, sir. Our industrial capacity, as you have intimated, has cratered since the 70s with respect to some of these key strategic products. So we're in a bind. We're a maritime nation. Alfred Thayer Mahan, a name you're familiar with, talked not just about naval power, but more broadly about sea power. And could you unpack that a little bit, explain what that means to be a nation of sea power, and explain how the SHIPS Act and the President's Maritime Action Plan can get us back on the right course as a sea power nation?
I'd be happy to, Senator Young, and I want to thank you and Senator Kelly for your leadership on the SHIPS Act. It has been absolutely essential for us. A friend of mine, Nicholas Lambert, wrote a fantastic book, Neptune Factor, which talks about Alfred Thayer Mahan in looking at this as economics, and that's what he understood. He understood sea power to be not just the application of military force, but economic force. It is trade, it is commerce. Whole reason to have a Navy is to ensure that the economics and trade is moving and flowing for a nation. We shifted our focus. We've gone kind of back and forth between being a continental and a maritime nation, and now we are obviously a maritime nation based on our imports and exports. And we have seen since 2021 with Ever Given getting stuck in the Suez, we've seen it with incidents along the coast of the United States, Dolly and Baltimore. We've seen how vulnerable our supply chain can be to disruptions, both being caused naturally and by other forces, outside forces, the Houthi, for example, in the Red Sea. So I think the importance here is that we've kind of gotten away from that lesson, but since 2021, it has been brought home numerous times through the supply chain crisis.
Right. So thank you, sir. And just to put a fine point on it, I'm quoting Mr. Paxton a lot today, but he did say earlier, and I wrote it down, maritime dependency makes us a client state. So, Doctor, what would happen if tomorrow China said we are no longer going to allow our vessels, our merchant vessels, to stop in U.S. ports? And how might the Ships for America Act offer a solution to that challenge?
Well, as you know, less than 2% of our imports, exports are on U.S. ships. And a nation like China, which has Chinese Overseas Shipping Company, a major shipping firm, can cause disruptions to us. I mean, just by simply ordering their ships to slow down and come in 2 days late will cause disruptions to us. By having a ships for the United States, we provide us with that reservoir, that backlog, so that we're not dependent on it. It was the thing that created actually the Jones Act in 1920, when we found out that 11% of our international trade was only carried on American ships. It's much lower today.
Right, and that legislation, perhaps it can be improved in various ways. We want to keep this coalition together around the Ships for America Act, but it was designed to change the cost structure, right? A very similar motivation that we're seeking today as with the Ships for America Act. Mr. Paxton, as my time comes to a close here, you know, there's some who doubt that America's shipbuilding industry is capable of responding to the enormity of this threat of supply chain interruption and all the rest. What do you say to that?
Categorically disagree. We have shipyards that are building large ocean-going vessels right now as we speak, up at Philly, NASCO, many other shipyards. We have the capability and capacity, sir. What we don't have is the demand signal your legislation will produce. That would open up more capacity in existing infrastructure and probably end up opening more shipyards.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member. Thank you to all the members and all the testifiers for your commitment to this issue. Mr. Vogel, in interacting with Senator Kelly's shop, my understanding is that this act is at least partly designed to sort of look at some of the success stories in individual shipyards and scale them up. Just for the record, can you tell us what is going right in the Philly shipyard and how we can sort of replicate that across the country?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. So much has gone well with the National Security Multi-Mission Vessel Program by removing those regulatory constraints that are in typical government shipbuilding. We awarded that contract to Philly Shipyard in April of 2020, right at the start of the COVID-19 impact. At that time, they had about 80 employees in the shipyard. Despite those challenges, we've been able to successfully deliver 3 of the 5 vessels on time, on budget. We've seen growth at 0.38% of the original budget. That's compared to often 20, 30, 40, multitude more percent in terms of growth.
So I get it.
So having the vessel construction manager fully integrated, we've been able to identify issues before they've really arisen. We've removed that sort of gotcha mentality of traditional government shipbuilding, where you have inspectors in the yard who are trying to bring back sort of the demonstration of their value. Instead, we're working hand in hand with the shipyard, identifying issues, identifying things like supply chain. How can we identify the right American supply chain and help them to build up that capacity?
And are there specific federal regulatory barriers, or is it mostly like a sort of staffing structure where the old school was you'd come in and you'd sort of post audit or prove to the shipyard that they were doing something wrong? Is that what you're talking about, or is there separately a set of regulations that need to be gotten rid of?
Yeah, it's both, Senator. So the federal acquisition regulation places numerous burdens. We've been able to reduce that by using a commercial model, minimizing the flow downs. One of the keys for us, too, was to be able to sort of break that privity between the government and the shipyard, snap that chalk line so that when the design was done, we were able to move out. Historically, government shipbuilding has been plagued by change orders, constant changes to the design. By eliminating all that, we've been able to instruct Philly to move out on a design that was agreed on back in 2019 and 2020 and execute upon that to get ships in the water.
Should I understand this sort of like value engineering? Is this kind of what we're talking about?
Absolutely, Senator.
Okay. Yep. I got it. Okay. Mr. Paxton, just talk to me broadly about the workforce. I mean, if we send the demand signal, that's great, but as we've seen, markets are not perfect, and there are pipeline issues and retention issues, so how do we address that sort of concurrently with the other stuff that we're working to do.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I think our workforce is sometimes a reflection of kind of the boom and bust cycles we go through in shipbuilding, both commercial and government. When the work's there and we have that long, serious construction, our workforce knows they have a career in that shipyard, not a job. And so having the work, being able to plan, being able to hire up your workforce, that happens because you have that long run of work. I know it sounds simple, sir, but that's in these shipyards that are privately held and publicly traded. They're making investments based on the best information they have, and they can't keep a workforce employed if they see a strategic pause or a reduction in the work.
Okay, got it. So you need to send a big demand signal to kind of establish a foundation for all this. What else?
I think we have been doing a good job with trying to go down to the middle schools, to the elementary schools, to explain that this is a career that you can pursue, and it's changing. We're talking about AI, we're talking about robotics, we're talking about new technologies coming to our shipyards. So the education, Senator, of making sure that this is an understood profession as opposed to you got to go get that standard 4-year degree.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just a real quick point on that. A lot of the budget reconciliation bill and One Big Beautiful Bill does a lot for this. It's a jumpstart, Navy, commercial. But on the workforce side, one of the really understated provisions here that hasn't gotten a lot of attention, the Pell Grants funding, which is a lot of federal money, now is able to go to certificate programs for registered apprenticeships and 529 programs to go to these registered apprenticeship programs for training, just that you're talking about, Mr. Paxton. I just want people to know that. It's a really good part of the program. Senator Curtis.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to begin by giving a shout out to my colleagues, Senator Kelly and Senator Young, for their work on this, for their leadership, and I look to them as important leaders on this, so thanks for their work. Dr. Mercogliano, if there was a theme for this hearing, it would be, where did we go wrong? That seems to summarize all my colleagues' questions. That was also my question. I won't bore down too much into that, but I'd like to specifically look at China, the last 20 years. Yes, we know of subsidies, we know the way the Chinese government works. Are there other things that we should be learning from the Chinese, innovations, and what else should we learn from this? And then kind of a follow-up to that question is, what could go wrong with China dominating? You talked a little bit about that, but I'd like you to bore down that a little bit more, the problem with China being so dominant.
Thank you, Senator Kurtz. China's dominance has been absolutely fascinating to watch. Again, won't quote the statistic again, but what's been interesting is how China has gone from small little shipyards to consolidating their shipyards into much larger entities. They took very disparate shipyard capability and have built it up into these huge conglomerates. Consolidation is the issue we see in shipping in almost all areas. And it's that vertical integration that I think is really the most disturbing that you see in them. Obviously, China has the ability to, low labor, a lot of money that's freely available to them, not a lot of overhead. We talk about the subsidies, the direct and indirect subsidies. From 2010 to 2018, they received about $132 billion in subsidies. Our Title 11 grants during that same period was $77 million. So, I mean, it is just proportionally different. But they control other aspects. I mean, they're building almost every container in the world and leasing them out. They're building the trailers that they carry on. We see Chinese mariners become much more dominant. The Chinese merchant ships are built with military capability in them. One of the things that we need to understand, the more military capable you build a commercial ship, the less commercially viable it tends to be. But the Chinese can do that because they don't have to worry about the net profit in the end. So Chinese Overseas Shipping Company can have commercial ships, roll-on, roll-off ships that can carry military capability. In many ways, to go back to what Senator Young was talking about, China has swallowed Alfred Thayer Mahan and really understand it in a way that other countries have not. And so they have embraced that. The other issue, too, is that China, Japan, and Korea are in a three-way war out there in shipbuilding. If you look over the past 3 years, China's share of shipbuilding has increased by 16%. That is the exact amount that Japan and Korea have lost. It's one of the reasons why you're seeing Japan and Korea so interested in investing in the U.S. And one of my concerns about the Ships for America Act is we don't become a Ships for Korea Act. We need to make sure that we focus it here in the United States. So it is a very coherent program put out by the Chinese.
Thank you. It's very insightful and enlightening. I saw a lot of heads shaking up and down as you were speaking. Let me go to the UK for a minute, because UK is a close ally. A lot of policies would be similar. While we've declined, they haven't. What can we learn from the UK?
Well, UK has gone through their peaks and troughs too, I would mention. They've had issues with their shipbuilding. I would argue that if you look at a lot of European shipyards, if I can expand out just a little bit, sure. One of the things that we saw was specialization in shipyards. So if you go to the Dutch, for example, they're building small craft, they're dealing dredges, very specialized. Germany, realized that they can't do quite the shipbuilding they do, but they produce propellers and diesel engines, much more specialized. Italians, Fincantieri building cruise ships, Finland building icebreakers. So the realization that specialization came in. I do get concerned if we try to get into a shipbuilding, competition against China, they're going to outcompete us all the time. If you look at where China is building today, they are number one in all categories of ships, except for cruise ships and liquefied natural gas carriers, but they're growing in that. I think we need to really focus and target in certain areas where we need to fill our strategic commercial fleet.
Thank you. Thanks to all the witnesses. I yield my time. Thank you. I don't know if you mentioned, Dr. Mercogliano, we help finance that too. Unfortunately, our Wall Street guys are always helping China, which is another challenge of ours. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all of our witnesses today. Representing a state in the Great Lakes, I want to focus a little bit to start with Great Lakes shipbuilding. For nearly 2 centuries, Wisconsin workers have built world-class vessels and ships for moving goods to market and also to power our Navy. Wisconsin workers and our shipbuilding companies can compete with anyone in the world, but they need a level playing field to do it. We've talked a bit about China. As I've been saying for years, China has gotten away with cheating the system and undermining our workers, and it's long overdue that we stand up to them. Prioritizing efforts to revitalize our domestic shipbuilding and repair sector is a matter of both economic and national security. I was proud to stand with workers to push President Biden and now President Trump to do right by these workers. Earlier this year, the administration announced penalties on China for the unfair trade practices in shipbuilding. I also strongly support passage of the Ships for America Act, our bipartisan and comprehensive legislation to revitalize the United States shipbuilding and commercial maritime industry. And I urge all of my colleagues to review and support this legislation. So, Mr. Paxton, so far this year, China has made 717 large commercial vessels, and the United States has made just one. Wisconsin stands ready to play a key role in revitalizing the country's shipbuilding capacity. How does the shipbuilding industry see the need to better utilize the Great Lakes workforce to meet the needs of the commercial, maritime, and Navy shipbuilding demands?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I know we focus on large ocean-going vessels, and we should, because they're important. I would point out last year we delivered 964 ships of all shapes and sizes, some of them built on the Great Lakes. This year we delivered 750 of those ships. So we shouldn't just throw away the fact that those are smaller ships and specialized vessels. They're being built all over the United States, inland waterways and the Great Lakes. So we do have ship capability that's really important. We gotta speak to that. I do think going forward, if we are doing something like the Ships Act, you're going to see something that they're calling now distributed shipbuilding, where you see modules and structural assemblies being built in non-traditional areas, in not your normal coastline shipyard areas. So that's a good thing, trying to get that entire industrial base in on it, where we can parse out pieces and modules that's a good way to utilize our industrial base.
Great. I wanted to add to previous questions about the small shipyard grant program. It's been something that I've championed for years, the funding for that small shipyard grant program. Small shipyards are often the lifeblood of coastal communities, and the grant program provides resources for smaller shipyards to upgrade equipment and support worker training programs. Companies in Wisconsin, including Marinette Marine Corporation, Fraser Shipyard, Fincantieri, and Marine Travel Lift, have all benefited tremendously from this program. So, Mr. Paxton, can you speak to the importance of small shipyards in America's maritime industrial base, and why continued and increased investment in the small shipyard grant program is critical?
Yeah, it was a program that was authorized right in this committee, and it has a long history. And its history is one of it's always been oversubscribed. Meaning, when there was 100 million in there was $1 billion in demand. So, what we know about the Small Shipyard Assistance Grant Program is that it's absolutely utilized the right way, and it's always oversubscribed. SCA fully supports it. We, like the SHIPS Act, putting a $100 million authorization in there for sustained investment in the program.
Thank you. Ms. Snow, thank you for your remarks. I appreciate you mentioning the value of apprenticeships and technical colleges. It's critical that we support the growth of a maritime workforce concurrent with efforts to support the shipbuilding and repair industry. If there are no workers available to build ships, these efforts are pretty meaningless. There are successful programs underway in my home state of Wisconsin. Northeast Wisconsin Technical College provides specialized training through a longstanding partnership with Fincantieri Marinette Marine to provide career paths and to good-paying union jobs and pathway to the middle class. The college has expanded this partnership to Fincantieri Bay Shipbuilding and their Sturgeon Bay campus. How can industry work better with technical colleges and entities like labor unions to grow the maritime workforce?
Thank you for the question. I think that they're creating a pipeline from technical schools directly to businesses is actually a vital solution to a lot of these workforce problems. I would go as far to say as introducing them earlier, though. I've created a pipeline with our Seattle Public Schools Skill Center, which is a high school program where their final that they take in high school and their welding program is our weld test that you take to interview. So if they have passed this class in high school, they are automatically set up for success at our business. So I would encourage other companies to take the personal leap to go and make those pipelines.
Thank you.
Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. I'll start with you, Mr. Paxton. You've been, from the background materials here, doing and advocating for shipbuilding in America for 18 years. What's different today that gives you hope versus the last 18 years where we've continued to see inaction by Congress and actually competing in shipbuilding?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. One of the things we've always advocated for was just a simple thing, having a national maritime strategy. We have these things for defense. We have them for other transportation modes. We don't have it for the maritime industry. I would say over the last 18 years, a little bit earlier than that, that's when we saw China enter the WTO, and we thought capitalism would take down communism. That didn't happen, and China did their 5-year plans and grew.
So just interrupt real quick. So that was 25 years ago. That was, you would agree, I think all of us should agree, that vote 25 years ago is a catastrophic disaster.
They played the long game, which they...
We played the dumb game.
Well, I won't speak to that, sir, but I will say that had a bad impact on all global shipbuilding because it's all declined since that moment happened.
Right. But you would agree, and Dr. Mercogliano, you would agree, energy policy does also matter, right? Like to build ships here at scale in America, you need affordable, abundant, reliable energy. Would you both agree on that?
Yes, sir. I think we need not just energy, but an entire strategy dealing with industry and all aspects of it to really promote shipping.
So a shipbuilding facility run by solar panels is decently unrealistic today.
I don't think you're going to be able to generate enough power for it with that.
But 94% of all new power generation under the Biden administration was wind and solar. So energy policy matters, regulatory policy matters, right? That's a big hindrance to our industry, to private industry, when you have regulatory policy that strangles the private sector. Would you agree?
It's very difficult in the maritime sector right now. You see that issue with just manning ships and the regulations that U.S. merchant mariners fall under in regard to licensing, and even the number of crew on board ships makes us very uncompetitive in that way.
And how about tax policy? Meaning when you have inconsistent tax policy, when you have corporate tax rates that are very high, you have a disincentivizing of investment, that also makes a difference, correct?
I agree. So I agree, Senator. One of the comments I had earlier was Americans are the fourth largest investors in shipping, just not in American shipping. They're putting their money offshore.
Yeah, and then workforce policies matter. I think all of you have talked about that. The importance of trade schools, investing in that, expansion of Pell. All of that happened in the One Big Beautiful Bill. Every single thing that I just mentioned was fixed in the One Big Beautiful Bill. Do you think, and I'll ask just quick yes or no, was the One Big Beautiful Bill helpful in getting more shipbuilding in America, yes or no?
Generational, yes.
So huge yes.
Absolutely, Senator, and we look forward to the funding that's been provided and appropriated to be placed on contract quickly.
Yes, sir. We have never seen this level of interest and effort being put into shipping in over 50 years.
Yes, no.
I do not have an answer for this right now, but I can submit a written answer. I'm here to talk about workforce development.
Okay. The good news is we can thank the Vice President of the United States for casting a tie-breaking vote on that bill, I guess. How about tariffs? Doctor, how do tariffs play into this equation? Should we allow China to continue to go unchecked, or do tariffs matter?
I mentioned, sir, that I think one of the efforts we can do to promote cargo on U.S. ships is to give a benefit to hauling cargo on U.S. ships and maybe waive tariffs on that. You know, we need to do something to incentivize putting cargo onto U.S. ships. Building ships will do no good if we cannot generate funds for them. Even in the Maritime Security Program, Tank Security Program, that money does not provide enough for our ships to be competitive and operate out there. And I would think we need a tariff strategy to assist in that.
Okay, perfect. And then last question for you, Mr. Paxton. The Senator Baldwin mentioned the Great Lakes. I will point out that the first entry from the ocean to the Great Lakes runs through Ohio. How important is it to keep the St. Lawrence Seaway open 12 months a year?
I think it's critical. I would just also echo, Senator, we need to do more shipbuilding in more places. And we can do that if we had that demand signal, or you see it happening, honestly, with the SIB, the Submarine Industrial Base, where they're putting modules and structures in other places, non-traditional places. We should be building in those places as well.
Yeah, let me just be clear. Unlike the East Coast and West Coast, Ohio's open for business. If there's somebody watching this in the shipbuilding industry, come to Ohio. We'll make it quick, we'll make it easy, and we won't absolutely torture you or put you through the ringer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moreno. Great questions, by the way. I think a generational answer that Mr. Paxton mentioned on the One Big Beautiful Bill. It's a really important point. By the way, there's shipbuilding now going on in Alaska. There's a good company in Cleveland.
Don't forget your families from Ohio.
Called American Tank and Fabricating Company that's doing good shipbuilding in Cleveland. So it's happening all over the country. Let me. I want to go to this issue of financing. Right. One thing that drives me crazy is how much our American financiers still are addicted to financing China's rise, including in their military. Fortunately, we have a provision in this year's NDAA that requires transparency. If you're an American investment bank or private equity company and you're investing in Chinese shipbuilding or, weapons or manufacturing or software development or chip manufacturing, we need to know about it. So, Dr. Mercogliano, you say, hey, we have this small fleet now, but were big investors. Has American capital been the key to the Chinese shipbuilding rise?
I think we definitely assisted in that in both the use of finances and even some industrialization. And we've seen that just recently where Italian company Fincantieri helped them construct their first passenger liner, which is going to be a competition for the Europeans. I think there's always the urge that China seems like the emerging behemoth, and so people want to join in on that.
We got to get our Wall Street guys off the addiction of funding the rise of our adversary. They've been doing it for 40 years. It's, quite frankly, it's un-American, and we're starting to push back on that. Mr. Vogel, I have a request for you. You've made a really good point on this vessel construction manager model, but also the gotcha approach of our own federal government with red tape and the mentality of catching you as opposed to supporting you. Can you give us, for the record, a very detailed list of unnecessary regulations from our own federal government that are inhibiting shipbuilding domestically, both on the DoD side and the commercial side? Can we get that from you for the record?
Happy to provide that, Mr. Chair.
Homework assignment. You've made a really good point on that, and I think we need to make the case. I had a great opportunity to sit down with this former Secretary of the Navy, John Lehman, under President Reagan, who was the father of the 600-ship Navy, which was quite an accomplishment. And I asked him, what was the secret sauce? How did you do that? He was a 38-year-old Secretary of the Navy when he started, pretty remarkable guy. The one key thing he said was no change orders, right? They put the pencils down. They told the industry, we're going to do 40 of these, destroyers, and then if we find something better for Block 2 or Block B or Block Bravo, we'll do a change order. But is that something we need also?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's really the key, and that's been the key to the success of the National Security Multi-Mission Vessel is limit the change orders. Once the government has a design, let's move out and build it on commercial standard.
Good. Senator Cantwell mentioned this idea of AI and software development. We actually, once again, in the budget reconciliation bill, there's so much good stuff in this, by the way. Pell Grants for apprenticeships. There's $450 million for software and AI deployment in U.S. shipyards in that bill. What impact do you believe software and AI could have in increasing the transparency of building schedules and supercharging the existing constrained workforce? Dr. Mercogliano, do you have a view on that, or any other witnesses?
I'd probably defer over to Mr. Paxton on that, sir.
Mr. Paxton, you've been given this one from your fellow panelists.
Absolutely. Look, we are trying to look at all technology advancements. In fact, that's one of the things we've been doing, Mr. Chairman, with our allies, strategic collaboration on the best practices in advanced technology. So I do think AI is going to play an important part.
So let me just conclude with a kind of an important question. You know, when you have this kind of momentum, bipartisan support, the president leading the one big beautiful bill, putting billions, and I mean billions, just the Coast Guard's $25 billion investment, $29 billion for shipbuilding, these other provisions that are important. What are some of the near-term initiatives that the Congress should prioritize, such as small shipyard grants, these regulatory reforms, workforce training programs, to start to try to get momentum? We've dug a giant hole. We've all asked the same question: how the heck did this happen? But there's momentum, there's bipartisan support, there's a lot of money, right, being put into this sector, both in the DoD military side, Coast Guard side, but commercial side. What do you think, just very quickly, kind of the quick hits that we can do in the next 1 to 3 years to show progress? It's going to take a long time to dig out of this hole.
Acquisition reform.
So what Mr. Vogel's been talking about?
That, but also some of the things you've been working on with the Forged Act and the Speed Act, things where we can really get at our acquisition.
Okay, I'm going to task you too, Mr. Paxton. How about a list of those as well?
Yes,
is that all right?
Yes, sir.
For the record here. Okay, Mr. Vogel, you're You're going to say regulations.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Regulations, and I would also say the Congress needs to focus on those platforms that need to be replaced immediately and can be built in commercial shipyards. Things like our Missile Defense Agency sensor vessels that are over 60 years old, a critical part of the Golden Dome protection of this country. Things like the roll-on, roll-off vessels for our ready reserve force, critical to national defense, can be built with simple commercial designs, cost-effective construction through a commercial model.
Dr. Mercogliano?
I would say leadership, sir. Both in World War I, World War II, we had that leadership. Edward Hurley and then Emory S. Land. Who's going to direct this? Where's that National Maritime Security Advisor going to be? Because there's a lot of moving parts here, and my fear is we get past it and we're not cutting steel anytime in the near future.
Okay. Ms. Snow?
I would say education and exposure, as well as the protection of industrial lands.
Okay, great. Senator Young, I'm going to give you the final.
Well, thank you, Senator Sullivan. There's so much
Flyover
excitement around the Ships for America Act and the Maritime Action Plan that we have a flyover, it seems, going on right now. This has been a great subcommittee hearing, so I thank all our witnesses. Just a couple of things I wanted to follow up on before we depart. One, Mr. Vogel, a number of questions have been lobbed at you about the regulatory burden of the federal government as it relates to shipbuilding. And your consistent response has been this vessel construction manager program and how effective it's been. This is, as I understand it, this is effectively a project manager that sits between the private sector shipbuilders and federal government, and once the federal government signs off on a contract for specs, there aren't changes. There aren't change orders. You give private sector flexibility and best-in-class project management tools to that manager, and they go to work and drive costs down. Is that accurate? Is that a fair description?
Yes, Senator, that's a perfect summary.
Okay, and this would overcome, as we think about regulatory burden, the regulatory burden associated with procurement and change orders. That is by far the biggest regulatory burden with shipbuilding. Is that accurate?
That's correct, Senator. Those pieces are what have really hampered our legacy government shipbuilding.
Okay, and if there's any witness who disagrees and regards another source of regulatory burden to be greater, if you raise your hand right now, but I think that's probably a shared belief. Okay, great. So when we think of regulatory burden up here on Capitol Hill, many of us, I would say especially Republicans, tend to associate that with OSHA or the EPA or these sorts of regulatory burdens, but instead we're talking about a procurement process and multiple changes. And I just think it's really important to bear that in mind. So I would say publicly here, if Senator Sullivan's subcommittee gets your list of regulatory burdens that we should address, and any of them aren't addressed, it's certainly my desire, and I know Senator Kelly, the other lead on this legislation, to accommodate those concerns as it relates to regulatory burdens. No pride of authorship here. And then the last point that I'd like to sort of elicit from some of you is the amazing workforce opportunities that might be realized up and down the value chain, but also geographically in this country. Because as someone who's spent a little time studying this issue, there's a tight labor market near many of our existing shipyards. And so in some circles, there's doubts. There's certainly uncertainty about our ability to unlock further labor to come and work at those shipyards. So not only do we want to see the modernization, perhaps expansion of some of those shipyards, we want to unlock fallow capacity or brand new capacity, potentially, in the coastal state of Indiana, the shores of the heartland, right? But could anyone speak to these opportunities? And to put a little flourish on it, this again is not unlike semiconductors. I would describe that as, we're facing novel challenges as a country. And this broader problem set of economic security is one we policymakers are struggling to deal with. And the way I like to describe it is, if we play our cards right, we have an opportunity to become a better version of ourselves, a more resilient version of ourselves, to avoid conflict through deterrence, but also to ask rank-and-file Americans to play a meaningful role in this generational, multi-generational project. So with that, I'll ask any of you to speak to this topic.
Senator, I'll just say, if we do this right, the SHIPS Act and other things that would come with the National Maritime Strategy, as I mentioned, distributed shipbuilding means you can build these things, pieces, parts of them, anywhere. And we should be focusing on Middle America and some of the places where traditionally we haven't built ships, because I think if we get it right, that's what's going to happen. Last thing I'll say, Jeff Boat, which was an amazing little shipyard, that shipyard used more steel than some of our large Navy shipbuilders combined over the course of a year, because they would pump out a barge and a half every day. And when that yard closed, it hurt our steel industry and it hurt the overall industrial base. So we got to make sure we stay focused on the fact that Jeff Boats was an important contributor to the shipyard industrial base, and when it went away, it caused a lot of pain.
I'm so glad you mentioned Jeff Boat. With the chairman's indulgence, I'm going to give the other witnesses an opportunity to respond, but a little flourish about my state. Right down the river, the Ohio River, from Jeff Boat, you have Evansville, Indiana. This was, at the end of World War II, the leading inland shipbuilder in the country. They produce 4 LSTs per day. Up north, we've got major steel production. We've got auto component manufacturers who could pivot to some marine production. We have Cummins engine and even a Caterpillar presence. Large marine engines are already in production. So lots of opportunity for what was once considered flyover America. Mr. Vogel.
Would absolutely agree, Senator. When we think about what the work that's actually being done at the shipyard, in many ways, it's just assembly of sort of components, and there's no requirement for those components to be coming from the same location as the shipyard. We were recently visiting a shipyard down in the Gulf, and we were looking at the development of cable spools that miles and miles of cable required for each of these ships, and those spools were being developed there on site. And I was thinking about states like Indiana, and that those cable spools could have been developed up there, creating great high-paying jobs in Indiana, transporting those down to the yard. And that allows the yard to use that space, that waterfront space that's so limited, to really focus on generating new shipbuilding opportunities.
Thank you, sir. Doctor?
As a graduate of a state maritime academy, I basically went to a 4-year trade school. And so I learned very quickly, not just I had a college degree, but how to go out into the industry. And I think one of the things we need to focus and we need to task MARAD, the Maritime Administration, to do in their mission to promote the merchant marine is to educate our college instructors, our universities out there, of the opportunities out there in shipyards. We just talked about the use of AI and a whole batch of new technologies that we can be drawing more population into. I think it's important what Mr. Paxton said, we got to get down to the lower level to get our younger generation involved, but also the potential for careers out there in this field is not being at all touching those graduates of universities, where they can make good money very quickly, yes, deal with student debt.
Well, as a fellow trade school graduate, thank you. Ms. Snow.
I would double down on exactly the same thing. I think investment in education, especially in education of adults, and there's a lot of adults that want to change their track and maybe just don't know the source to go to. I also think an investment in time and energy into even younger than colleges. I think that maritime should be introduced as a valid career path in kindergarten, just like a doctor or a lawyer.
Great stuff. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Young. Thank you for your passion here. I couldn't agree more on this whole idea, what I've been referring to as our nation as a shipyard, right? And we had legislation last Congress, the Ensign Act, that my team wrote that was very focused on that, primarily on Navy shipbuilding, but it's a great point. We got the JAG Shipbuilding Company up in Alaska doing this as well, but you're right, all over the country. And I think we got a really good jump start, as Mr. Paxton said, a generational advantage with the One Big Beautiful Bill, the Budget Reconciliation Bill. It does focus a lot on training, so it's an exciting time. The key, from my perspective of this whole hearing, the federal government's got to help, not like stop. You know, we got big challenges, and the federal government for decades, especially in Alaska, came up and said, how can we crush you? How can we stop you? How can we prevent you from doing anything that's going to help your constituents or America? We got to change that mentality. So, Mr. Paxton, Mr. Vogel, I'm looking forward to getting your list of things where the feds can help us, not continue to hurt us. But again, I want to thank everybody. It's a really, really good, informative hearing. Good start on an issue that's very bipartisan we need to address. Let's get on it, right? We have the leadership from the president and his team, senators like Senator Young and his legislation, which is very bipartisan. Money, we got some pretty good money right now in the One Big Beautiful Bill. So with that, I want to thank the witnesses. Senators may continue to submit questions for the record for the next week on this hearing, and upon receipt, we ask the witnesses respectfully to submit their written answers to the committee by the close of business by November 18th, to give you a little bit of time to do your homework. And again, I want to thank everybody for an excellent hearing today. This hearing is now adjourned.